Thank you very much. It's so nice to be here with my friends. I must tell you, I have to get this out of the way. Spizzy very nervous tonight. I don't know what's going. I think it's because it was so good before. You know, the first time, the debut, that was so good. Now, that puts pressure, I know. But the thing is, I think it's like sex. We all understand this, right? When you have sex the first time with someone, it's fantastic. But then when you go to have sex with them again, it's like very boring. Anyway, that is my experience of sex, which is probably why my life is a fucking mess. But yeah, so I think that that may be what's happening to me tonight. But I just wanted to let you in. It's busy, a little bit neurotic, so they do strange things. He may say strange things. Oh, and I had to explain my accent to people. That made me very nervous. Like, where are you from? Where are you from? I say somewhere between Bohemia and Bavaria, but then I realized that I'm a very southern Mediterranean person. So I don't know. I think maybe I'm influenced because we are on Greek Street here, and I start to speak. I pull it in. I take Spizzy, take everything in. Oh, I'm spitting out my popcorn. People take everything in. And I take everything in, and it's Greek. And then I have this student, sometimes she Iranian, and I just end up, reflecting back, making this accent. I don't know, so I can't explain. My heritage, too complicated. I mean, what would make a monster like Spizzy? I do not know. Okay, so some hello, cigarette. So hello. So my housekeeping I want to say is that you have on your tables here for all of you, and at home you must know when you see this, that there is something called skygilbert.com. Now, if you go to skygilbert.com, Ryan said I have to say it 3 times. skygilbert.com, you can get all the newsletter for Spizzy and all the information you need to know. Also, tonight, we are no longer having the open mic after this because of various scheduling problems, but every week I'm going to have a new mystery guest. I know you all in suspense, I know. Tonight we have mystery guests. I'm not going to say who they are, they're no longer mystery. But if you want to be a mystery guest poet, or novelist, or performer, then you must contact Spizzy at skygilbert.com, and you must say, I would like to be your mystery guest. And who knows, maybe we can work something out. So, what I want to talk about now before we start with my first guest, very exciting, Miss Kirsten Johnston. I want to, Johnson, excuse me. I want to say this. Oh, I'm burping, too much booze, eh? So I want to say, there we go. I want to talk about what happened to me. Maybe this is why I'm so neurotic, okay? This is very touchy subject, but Spizzy, he don't shy from these touchy topics. So what happens, I'm on the subway. How many of you ride the subway? Yes. Good, you do, okay. We must do that, we have no choice. So there I am on the subway, and I don't know what to say, but there's a tree. You're all going to get very uncomfortable. It may be very uncomfortable. Hello, someone's coming in. But anyway, what happened is that a guy was there, and he was perhaps what we call vulnerable people, and he laid down on the tree. There's 3 seats together, so you can lie down, right? So he lay down, or he was already laying down when I came in. And I noticed him, and I try not to look too much because, well, this is the truth. He was jerking off in the subway. Yeah, so I just want to tell you, now I'm not demonizing this vulnerable person. I'm just telling you what happened. Because I think it's important to talk about it. Now, his penis, we can call it that. We don't say privates here. I covered that last section. We say penis, vagina. We use the actual words, cock, cunt, whatever. We don't say private. So his penis was not actually out there. It was, he had his pants hiked down just in front, and he was like, but we know what's going on, right? And there were these couples. Why am I worried about the straight couples? How fucked am I? But I was worried about the straight couples and the girls standing there and they're going at it. So what I decided to do after I got off the subway was, because they have that announcement, right? And it says, if you see something, say something. That's what they say. So I did see something. So I went I phoned up and I just told them, I just said, there was a man masturbating on the subway today. And she said, thank you. You know, so what am I gonna do with that? But anyway, so I don't know what we're gonna do about this. Now I used to have, and I think it's a huge, huge problem. Like gigantic, because I tried to break this up with the Go. With the Go, I travel the Go all the time. And the Go is like, well, they don't even want to hear about vulnerable people. They got really mad at me. You want to talk about vulnerable people? You want to talk about the whole huge world problem? And I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't, you know. So we're not maybe supposed to talk about it, but they closed the washrooms in the Go stations now because of this, because of stuff that happens. So anyway, not necessarily their fault, but why is it that there are so many people with mental illness and with oftentimes they're taking the drugs? Like, are we allowed to say it? Not always. They take drugs, but sometimes they're taking the drugs and they're there and they're living. So how did we get to this situation? Before COVID, do we remember? There wasn't this situation, right? And it is here now, and we're going to have to deal with it. Now, on the other hand, Spizzy has always had the philosophy. Okay. I believe that sex should be public and religion should be private. That is what Spizzy believes. Okay, thank you. I'm getting some applause. Okay, I think if we followed this philosophy, the whole world would be a better place. So you can have all the sex you want in public. Now, the problem with here is that there was no, I don't know if this man wanted to have sex in public. Do you know what I mean? We could say maybe he doesn't have. In fact, probably does not have. We don't know for sure, but probably does not have a home in which to jerk off in, which we all have. And we're all very happy to be, you know, have our homes to jerk off in. But he did not have that. So there is that inequality there. But still, if the sex in the public happens and the religion happens, because, you know, if people just shut up about their fucking religions. No, Spizzy, I bet you don't believe, but Spizzy, very spiritual person. Spizzy have a relationship with, I don't like to call it God, because then we have this, you know, guy with beard. Who are we thinking of? White guy usually with beard? No. But I do have this relationship with something. I'm not going to explain it because now I'm being public about my private experience of the religion. But it is not religion. It's some spiritual things that I believe. That's it. That's all I'm going to say. So I have that. It's my business. I'm not going to tell you. But if we didn't talk about that, I think you wouldn't have. I just solved now the whole Arab-Israeli conflict. I just solved it. If religion was private, then people would go, I don't, you know, what you do in the privacy of your own home with your God, that is up to you. I'm not going to interfere. But we're in a bad place where religion is everywhere, and sex only comes out when this man, somehow accidentally or on purpose, is jerking off in Subway. Okay, so that's my little lecture for now.
Hi folks, it's Ryan Russell here. We're here at the Powder Labs and we're going to do a bit of a demonstration to show how this innovative powder-based lube turns into the slickest, most viscous and slimy, slipperiest water-based lube you've ever used in your entire life. Okay, let's get going. We've got an empty beaker here. We've got some water. We're going to be adding more. And I'm going to add some of the powder-based lube. We're slowly going to add water to it until ultimately we've added the full 100 milliliters. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've added one of these sachets of powder lube. You can see it here in the beaker. This is a 200 milliliter beaker. So you can see that in there. It looks kind of like snow. Now we're going to slowly add some water. So first I'm just going to add a little bit. And you can see here it's already started to transform. It's a super solution and it'll never fully dissolve. So basically the more that you use it, the wetter it gets. So we've added probably about 20% of the total amount of water that we're going to add to this ultimately. And you can see it's kind of mixing itself. And it is already getting into a slimy mass in there. Okay, so we've added that water. This is a total of about 50 milliliters. I'm going to give it a little bit of a stir. So you can see even now, you've got the better part of lube. This is only about half mixed though. Okay, so we've got another 50 milliliters of water here now, and we're going to top it off. So this is the total amount of water that you would typically add to the sachet. You know that because on the back, it's pre-measured for you. You basically fill with warm or cool water right up to the fill line. It's like special effects stuff. This is unreal. So listen, folks, I hope you enjoyed today's demonstration of Plowder Lube. It's Ryan Russell here, signing out from the Plowder Labs. Go to plowder.com to learn more and get slick with the latest technology for your lube. Live chat is available now at plowder.com.
Guest for you tonight, which I'm very proud to present. And this is someone who I've known for many years, and she's on her way up here. Will you please welcome Miss Kirsten Johnson? She's going to perform for you.
Hello. This is just a little something I wrote recently after a trip. Existential crisis at the Museo Nacional Antropologia, or city vacation, beach vacation, which is better, discuss. You just arrived in a city of 22 million people. And now, here at the Museo, you're joined by the almost tangible presence of possibly 22 million more. People who had lives and now do not. And if the Museo is any indication, they spent a good portion of said lives trying to stay alive, carving giant chunks of stone into toothy, tusky designed monsters to freak out their enemies, or build lavish temples to convince the gods not to crush them or to send clouds of locusts, sacrificing babies and bejeweling their tiny skulls, because some gods might very well prefer a bejeweled baby skull to lavish temple. It depends on the god.
Correct.
And all this to ask fate not to do what fate does, which is kill you. I'm here in a semi-omniscient state just by virtue of arbitrarily being in the present. And being here in the present, I can see that it doesn't work. All that effort, and still you died. And ergo, I will too. Maybe I should have just gone to the gift shop first. Bought a not too overpriced jade, what have you, and then when things go dark, I could distract myself, look down and just go, oh, it's so pretty. But no. After the 18th ornate tomb, I find myself thinking, scooch over. I'm just gonna wait it out, Mayan style. This, I know, is not a healthy response. What would be a healthy response? Yell. Yeah, bang something hard. Eat meat that's been freshly killed, preferably by you. Find someone to... You don't necessarily have to make a life, but dance around the concept vigorously. Make something. My parents came to Mexico City on their honeymoon, trying to make me. They didn't. They made me a year and a half later. This time they both got Montezuma's revenge and tried to sleep it off in the middle of 3 competing all-night mariachi bands. Poor things.
Definitely. But
my dad would have loved the Museo Nacional de Antropologia. Always a sucker for the intersection of history and death. I fear I do not come from life-affirming stock.
but we'll see. What's happened?
The beach. Puerto Escondido. The waves are so powerful. And when the sun is low, it shines through, and it looks like stained glass. And the sunsets feel like church. But almost everyone you meet is an idiot. Well, I know this because, well, I'm pretty sure it's because, I'm almost positive it's because they seem happy and relaxed.
That. You're not going to get down and
I didn't sit down. Oh, I want to know you'll be in that special chair over there because this is just so old they can hardly get into one chair. Never mind the other.
I'm gonna try not to go into this Montenegrin or whatever accent that you do.
Oh, that's right, you actress. She wonderful actress. She had my play called Greg's Cookies. Man, you have to clap. Greg's Cookies, even if you didn't see it. She did it here. It's a wonderful, ethical imp where we are. And Sigurd, the other actress, is here too, and was big success. So yes, as actors have a tendency to imitate, to constantly imitate. But I wanted to get back to this thing that you talked about there. Oh, I know. Have you read Yuval Noah Harari? Have you guys read him? He's the new guy. He's this.
And you referenced him in the play, and at that point I should have thought.
Oh, that's right. Well, that's okay that you didn't go look him up. But he has a whole book about, when you started talking about Mexico with ruins, and got this whole, it's a history of sapiens. So we are sapiens, and his book is called Sapiens: A History or something.
Yeah.
Very interesting. He's written all these books, and he's a late rich, and he's a very accessible philosopher. Anyway, that's just me yabbering on. So I was going to start out by saying, I met Kirsten many, many, many years ago when she was, how old were you when you were in Hiller's first play? When the piano, that was the piano, or the thing Peter was in.
1920?
You were 19 or 20,
Yeah.
right? Absolutely. And then you were in a scene on that play. Outside was Hiller Latoya, and the production was called This Is What Happens in Orangeville. And people in Orangeville got very upset by that play. Because it was called, they said, stop the play. It's called This Does Not Happen, because it was all about murder. So they didn't like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, you were at the beginning, and you were a piano student, and there was a horrible, sadistic piano teacher. This is the kind of thing Hiller did.
Yeah.
It's the lobby before the play started.
Yeah.
And you were being like, it was so scary and so horrible and so abusive. I loved it. and you at 19 were doing this kind of thing, and I wasn't going to ask you this about later, but we were in this play that Hiller directed, which I want Kirsten to talk about. Hamlet, 8-hour Hamlet.
Yeah.
Right? And I was Claudius, and you were Ophelia.
Yeah.
And we didn't get to see Ophelia. She did this thing, and you correct me if you remember different. I know I'm now yabbering and not interviewing you at all, but we were doing this thing where we never got to see Ophelia. We go like, what's Ophelia going to do? Because there's the mad scene, she go Nazi. And so we want to know what's happening. And then he finally showed us, and what did you do? And what was that like?
Oh, Spizzy Sky is saying that they didn't get to see those other actors because we'd rehearse in private.
That's
so
to be clear.
Ophelia doing the mad scene.
He kept saying you're gonna see it sometime.
Yeah. So I came out with a bunch of big basket full of rotting vegetables and just smeared them and smushed them into my face and my hair and my dress and my clothes. And so that was and it was like half an hour. It was a long scene.
A lot of smashing of the vegetables.
Yeah.
Of the rotten vegetables.
It
Absolutely.
smelled.
I mean, it really worked for me and for the queen, the woman playing the queen, because we were truly shocked when you came out and started smashing the vegetables.
Yeah.
Now, is it true, I know, personal, private thing, but did he actually ask you to put them somewhere else?
Yes, he did. And yes, he did. Initially, he did. And I said, yeah, I won't do that.
And how old were you at that time?
21.
21, but even at 21, and Helen was somewhat older, like me, on my age, and she stood up to this man and said, I'm not putting vegetables, well, we won't say, but we will, vagina. I'm not putting vegetables. But you clap, but you must understand also that for me, you may not disagree, this is the relationship that a good director has with actors.
Yeah.
They suggest things that are absolutely scary and crazy.
Yeah.
And you have stage managers also who help. But they say these horrible things, and then an actor like you will come and say, well, no, I'm not going to quite do that. right? But what you came up with the smashing was so, and for me it was like, well, Ophelia isn't just some pretty little singing the song, you know? Like that's what usually see with Ophelia. So I wanted to ask you, because Kirsten is a visual artist and also she is a actress and a writer. You just heard her writing, and I'm sure there must be some other things. But
Filmmaking.
filmmaking also, I've seen your films. Your films are on your website and they're so fantastic. Yeah. No, I mean, there was one during COVID that totally helped get me through COVID. The one about the lady, just mention it, the lady with the thing you're not supposed to touch.
Oh, don't touch it. It was about poison ivy, yes.
That's right, it was about this lady.
It's a tribute to Mrs. Howell and the Gilligan's Island.
Oh, that's what you were doing. I didn't know what it was, but I loved it. And she was like this crazy lady who was telling you the how. But what I loved the most was she kept saying, you want to touch it. I know you. You want to touch it, but you must not. And she kept like trying to touch it. Anyway, so you have to go see Kirsten's videos because they're quite... Okay, so now I'm going to be all intellectual and say, do you consider yourself to be a feminist?
Yes, I do.
Yes, good, important. That's not a boring question. How does that manifest itself for you as an artist? Or is it a thing that's just unconscious? Are you just by default a feminist in the sense that you're a woman and you're doing work and you're putting it out there?
Well, I'm a woman who's doing work, but I'm also aware. I just naturally, my inclination, my interests are. I tend to, when I'm painting, I tend to only paint other women, and I didn't make a conscious choice to do that. But I think there's a lot of men who make films that have only men in it, and it's not even an issue. It's just like, what do you mean? There's a bunch of people, and that's sort of what I'm saying. The same thing. What do you mean? There's a bunch of people, and they just happen to be women because.
Yes,
and all of a sudden, because they're women, it's a thing.
Like, why are you painting the women? And it's like, well, why are you painting the men? Why are you painting anybody? Of course, why not paint the women?
Yeah, I mean, there's just it's just what interests me, and there is a huge amount of inequality, and I'm aware of it.
Is that the only way that it manifests itself? In the subject matter of what you do? Like, I mean, because I don't think there's a polemic, and we talked about this with Hope last summer, and I tried to get Hope to tell me what was the point of her poem. So, I mean, I don't expect you to say, rah, rah, women, because when I do the gay play, I don't go, rah, rah, gay. So I don't expect you to do that. But I don't know, I think partially it has to do very much, I would say subject matter is so much.
Yeah.
Like in the sense of like what you choose to write about, and who is the central part of what you're doing your thing. You know what I mean? Because
well, the things like when my series of paintings, Catfight, was all about
catfight. This is the stewardesses, right?
Yeah, the stewardesses.
Stewardesses catfighting.
But it was through a lens of like, okay, this is a thing. This is a powerful cultural meme, but it's also stupid and ridiculous, and let's poke fun at it and
well, I totally love
two of the models from Catfight, Sigrid and Angelique are
here, and I used it for, you allowed me to use it as publicity for one of my plays, that thing, and I loved it. But what's interesting is some people would look at it and go, oh, why are we seeing, women fighting? Apparently, I don't know, because this is apparently heterosexual thing, that women wrestling, it turns on the men's, they get to, the hard-ons. But I don't have that, but apparently, so you do that, and it's stewardesses fighting, but it isn't made for that male gaze, right?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting kind of thing you're doing.
Well, and it's funny, because I have that film up on my website, and it's got so many hits, so many more hits than anything else I've ever done. But I'm sure that the majority of them are like people going like, "Oh, this is not what I want," and then they
right. Oh, really?
Right? Because it's not. As soon as I start talking,
they don't get the point.
Well, they're like, no, I'm talking all the way through it about like, this is really stupid, and like, why is this a thing?
Right, exactly.
And let's analyze why it's a thing. I mean, it's still funny. I'm not making it sound like try, but
yeah, but I also think it's interesting because when we had Annie Sprinkle, right? Anybody remember Annie Sprinkle?
Yeah, sure.
She's quite a fabulous sex trade worker in person, and she came to Buddy. She did performance, and there were some people who shall not be named who said, "Oh, there are men who come. If you have Annie Sprinkle, I seem to be doing a lot of masturbating tonight. They will be there jerking off in the back row. And I remember Sue Golding, Johnny Golding, she is now my favorite person in the world. She's in England, she's amazing. She said, well, so what? There's a guy in the trench coat in the back, but it's still what she's doing. Do you understand what I mean? Like, if you're gonna stop doing feminist work because some guy might be jerking off in the back, then let's not do that. Anyway, I want to talk about something else. So this is a blatant question. Are you, Kirsten Johnson, a gay man? The only reason I say this is because what happened is that when we were working on cookies, we were talking, and at one point, for some strange reason, I happened to be looking at, was it To Tell the Truth or something? It was an old American TV show. I happened to be looking at it, and I said, there's this show that and you were like, oh, I've watched all of To Tell the Truth.
Yeah.
I've watched every episode, and then you talked to me about watching Betty Davis or something, and I'm going, are you a gay man? Like, I don't get it. Like, you totally have, you seem to some degree to have a gay man living in your body. Yeah. Not true.
Yeah, I just think, I'll bring back the feminist thing. The definition of being a woman is maybe broader.
Absolutely.
And it includes watching every single episode of To Tell the Truth and What's My Line and all the music.
Of course, it's very broad. And I'll just end off by saying that I think that you're very good friends with R.M. Vaughan. So we almost have applause for R.M. Vaughan here. Let's applaud. He died during COVID. We don't talk about. We talk a lot, and of course we must talk about the people who died of COVID, but there are people who died of lockdown. And I don't know if that's what happened with him, but there are several people I know who who were very lonely, and it was very bad. Anyway, RM died, and I knew him way back. You knew him a little more recently, but he was quite an amazing guy.
Yeah.
Okay, but I guess that we have to go on because I think that we have another more show to do. Could you please give lots of applause for Kirsten Johnson? Thank you very much.
What is Plowder Lube? Plowder Lube is a forward-thinking, water-based lube that's more convenient, environmentally friendly, and cheaper than the other guys. Plowder Lube comes in chargers, which are water-activated custom sachets of concentrated powdered lube. Just add water and the powder instantly transforms into a super lube that's super slippery and without being too sticky. Each charger of Plowder Lube has more lube than the other guys, and at about half the price. Or save big and get a full deck of Plowder Lube, and it's got 5 chargers for about the same price as 4. You can even get subscriptions and get Plowder Lube discreetly delivered to your door and never run out. Go to plowder.com to learn more and get slick with the latest technology for your lube. Live chat is available now at plowder.com.
Oh my goodness, Spizzy being very neurotic, talking about his personal problems with somebody, and right in the middle of it, so I'll continue with my personal problems. So what happens with Spizzy is this part of the show before the next final guest, or 2 guests would be, or maybe 3, is that what Spizzy does is he talk about his mother. So my mother, very important to me, and she crazy person, she beautiful, she inspired me, but she also drive me crazy. So I want to tell you, you're not going to believe this. It's just a little tidbit to give you some idea how crazy my mother was. So before she died, I think this was her last exit to the romantic scene because she divorced my father and then she got into various romances. And so what happened to her was that she came to my sister and I, and she said, she used to always go drink in bars. She used to go to the Bistro 990. Does anybody remember Bistro 990? Yeah, it was on Bay Street. It was like for film stars. And my mother, she lived in that apartment. It's a hotel, Sutton Place. She acted like a movie star. She thought she was a movie star. She was just my mother. That was a bit of a problem. But at any rate, She lived in a certain place, and she would go there and maybe she'd be a movie star. So who does she meet? She's probably 60 at this time. But as I said, she looked like Mary Tyler Moore. Anyway, so she's there and she meets, are you sitting down? David Carradine. You know who David Carradine is? Now, this is a great story about my mother. I wrote that poem about it. So she meets him and she tells my sister and me, I met a man at Bistro and we're getting along very well. His name is David Carradine. And I said, the actor. I said, wow, David Carradine, that's amazing. And they had a lot in common. I think basically what they had in common is they were both world-class drunks. But at any rate, and of course, Carradine was more than that. Very dark character. You know how he died? Here I go again. It's a big night for this. But he tied himself up and he strangled himself and he was masturbating. Anyway, so he's a dark. He took a lot of drugs, David Carradine. He did all that stuff, right? I thought, my mother is friends with David Carradine? And she doesn't know that he's kind of crazy, whatever. Because my mother was like conservative. Like she voted for Barry Goldwater. But then she had this other part of her that was like, whatever. So anyway, she's having this friendship with Mr. David Carradine. She's hanging out with him. I don't know how far it went. I think that probably just whatever, lots of flirtation. My mother was very good at the flirtation. So they're probably doing that. And then at some point she goes, it's over. I'm no longer friends with Mr. David Carradine. And I go, what happened? And she said, well, he slugged me. So he slugged my mom. It was even in the paper. Like unidentified woman slugged by David Carradine. And then, she was okay, but he, and I could totally see that happening. Two world-class drunks, two really type A personalities, they get together and he slugged her. So it was over after that. And I think after that, she just sort of decided that she was going to be an old lady, but that's another story. So that was her last big adventure. Good for her. Good for my mother. So my next guest is somebody who, you're going to find out about him when I interview him. So he should start coming up here now because he's not quite as old as me, but he moves better than I do. But he has to come up here. Will you please give lots of welcome applause for Mr. David Bateman?
Thank you. Skizzy. Skizzy or Spizzy? Spizzy, sorry.
Yelling with.
Okay, great. But that's good. I don't know if I can follow that David Carradine story. But, Spizzy told me he was going to ask me a question about my mother earlier when he sent me a text. So I thought I would read one. I have many mother poems. I'm going to put them all together from all of my books and make a collection called The Mother Poems someday if I ever stop drinking. So this is one that I quite like, and it's basically, so it's called Tampak's Tale. Tampax for me was always something tucked into a little paper bag my mother folded and slid into my pet's pocket early 1960s and said, "Give this to the cashier, sweetheart, and tell them to read the note inside, but don't look at it yourself, and don't open the bag once they filled it." I don't know if my mother ever figured out that I can't keep secrets, and when someone tells me not to do something, I just do it. There was a short walk from our house to the strip mall by the bowling alley and the barber shop, to the pharmacy and those hot Italian barbers, the Atlas brothers, with the beautiful hairy necks, sometimes shaven clean when I went for a haircut as a child, and sometimes rippled with feathery waves of thin heavenly grasses over the edge of their white barber collars, like slender black reeds on taut, marshy speeds of flesh, like an acre of night in the eyes of a curious child, exploring heaven's cellar, similes craving form and function in the hollow of my gender-bent pre-nubile stays, like Ged's dew dark skin, sweet, swarthy, sexy haiku, braying boyish lust. Hushed by my timid manner, I saw their necks like I saw Tampax. Sights of desire I didn't understand, yet lurking in secret spaces I was trusted with. So they would cut my hair and sit me high on a flat-bottomed wooden hobby horse that didn't rock, lifting my little 7-year-old frame toward their manly scissors. One day I was sent to get my hair cut and told to fill my mother's secret Tampax order after my haircut was done. Paul Atlas raised me high out of the hobby horse's saddle. I pulled the money out of my pocket and the folded paper bag fell on the floor. Paul Atlas bent over and picked it up and said, "Hey, what you got in there, little fella?" I had looked in the bag already, and I had seen the word scribbled on the little square of paper. And I looked at his beautiful neck, and I felt strong, invincible. And I thought of that strange word Tampax, and I had no idea what I was looking at or what the word meant. It made me think of Ajax, a little town near where I lived. And I knew that it was also the name of a cleaning product named after a Greek hero. So I thought maybe Tampax was Greek, too. And I wanted to sound smart and confident in front of that sexy barber, so I said, "Well, it's Tampax from my mom. I get it for her all the time. I think it comes from Ajax, named after a handsome Greek man." Well, the 3 other brothers and their patrons all looked up, startled, uncomfortable, and laughing. Oh, I was a timid child, blonde and small, and no match for all the testosterone assembled in that barber shop that day. Paul Atlas had lifted me into that hobby horse, but this day was a turning point. I was getting a little big for the lift, and from that day on, he let me get in and out myself. And he wasn't as friendly as he'd always been, and my mother noticed that he wasn't as friendly to her, too. And he didn't comment on her nice new hot pet outfits like he used to when she first became a widow. And I grew up fascinated with my mother's body and men's hairy necks and how sleek and lovely they looked when they trimmed that hair, and my father's hairless chest was always a map of the world for me on Sunday mornings. Crawling into bed with my parents and peering over the sleek exposed mounds of his upper torso, enchanted by geography I had yet to navigate and conquer, and the lacy edges of my mother's nightgown, frill and brawn, inhabiting my little head like myth and story at such a tender age. Like Greek gods and the young men and older women who must have loved them. I think it all just made me want to have sex with men named Ajax, and women with secret folded notes in barber shops who laughed at childish mythological stories about Tampax, and how my mother bathed me with her when I was small enough to fit in the same bathtub, and her breasts were like those shaved next to me. It all just meshed together with thoughts of beautiful barbers laughing at me and growing out of child seats, but never growing into manhood until I was almost middle-aged. Forever, that little boy, sent on his own at such a tender age to play with adults, but never given proper instructions, just notes folded into flattened paper bags, and men who would never love me the way I dreamed Greek heroes ought to. You know, sometimes it only gets better when we unfold those notes ourselves and refuse to keep secrets and do what we're told not to, and learn to love women bathing us like goddesses, half afraid but terribly curious in a Greek tragedy kind of way of what we might find in the luscious folded layers of all these mythological bodies. That's good.
Okay, Mr. David, the first thing I want to say to you is a compliment, because I experienced it live here now, and that is that sometimes when I hear you read your poetry, I get intimidated because you're good. And I think maybe I'm not as good. I don't like Spizzy, not like that feeling. It's not your problem. It's all about Spizzy's neurosis tonight. So let's talk about your mother and my mother, okay? But we'll try not to talk about all my mother. But I'm wondering, because we both had these close, now, would you call it, to some degree, from when we came from, a stereotypical homosexual relationship with a mother?
Yeah, I would say that that's not something that has been talked about a lot for a century. Freud talked about it. Judith Butler, through Freud, talked about it. We sometimes, our sexuality, our gender can develop through our relationship to our mother. And I think after writing that poem, I realized that without consciously going to people like Butler and Freud, that I was looking at notions of sexuality and gender through that kind of gaze, how we learn that from our mothers and sometimes from our mothers' bodies.
Now, were you, yes, mother's bodies, and were you very distant from your father? That's another cliche, very true for me. Were you very...
No, I was very close to my father, but he died very suddenly in a car accident when I was 20.
Oh.
So I often wonder what that would have been like, because he had his homophobia, but we were very close, and he was a very kind person. But I have no idea, because I lost him fairly young.
Right.
He was an alcoholic, and he lived through the Second World War, fought in the Second World War. He's got a lot of demons, and I think we were close, but it was very conflicted. And then my mother lived for another 30 years, so I had the opportunity to become closer to her.
And what do you say now? Here we got the other part of it, because for me, it was love-hate with my mother. I'll start with this. I thought she could read my mind. I don't know how to tell you. I thought we were the same person. We were so close that I had to be disabused by a therapist at the Hinks Institute, who someone was telling me about Hinks Institute, David, tonight, but another David. So did you feel that?
Well, I think in reference to...
How close was that?
It was very close. In reference to the stereotype, I think that's something that we get perceived as gay men, that we are, even if we're not. And I was very close to her, but we also had... I don't ever hated her, but I loved her deeply, but I also was very aware of how difficult she could be and how difficult I could be. Like, I remember performing in my hometown, and I would take her to those performances, and that's where people would feed off of the stereotype. Oh, there's David again with his mother. But then I'd hear later that if I was on stage and I wasn't paying attention to her, well, I'm on stage, bitch, what the fuck do you want from me? But I heard later that she, when she felt neglected in the audience, she would look at people and say, that little bitch. So I think my mother and I were equally kind and unkind to each other. And that worked for both of us. I loved her deeply.
That reminds me so much of my own mother's, because she used to come to all my openings for a while, all my things that would be like about this guy Gilbert person, and she would come to them, and then she would say, I'm not going. And she'd go, I'm not going anymore. It's just like what you say in a way. She said, I'm not going. I said, why are you not going anymore, mother? And she'd go, because it's all about you there.
Oh, that was not my...
And I was like, but you're my mother, you're supposed to be happy that it's all about me. And it's, you know what I mean? Very, very strange, I thought.
My mother wasn't like, my mother wanted to come all the time.
And she got off, because that's what a mother should do. Now, I want to change the subject I just want to say, it's very important to understand, though, that we must say this, and see if you agree with me, but that there are loads of gay men who are not close to their mothers at all, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which is so interesting that though we are part of this stereotype, which seems absolutely true, it's also true that you will meet the ones who do not fit in that. So I wanted to talk about this with David. We'll see. But what happened was that when we first, I don't know, was that when we first met? I remember standing in front of the poor Alex Theater.
In the lobby.
In the lobby, thank you. And you came up to me and you said, I think you came up and said, I have a bone to pick with you, mister.
No, I think you don't.
Okay. So what did you say? There was some, or maybe you were telling me sorry, or
the way I remember it is that you would come to see a show that I designed the show. Okay. I was still living in Peterborough. And I had just written a review of your show, The Dressing Gown.
Oh my God, that's scary.
And I came up to you, and I don't recall I don't recall saying I have a bone to pick with you. I recall saying I saw your play, and I thought it was really wonderful in many parts, but I have had some issues. But I just wanted to let you know that. And you said, and I remember you looking at me and saying, you let your review speak for yourself, and you turned around and walked away.
Oh my God! Well, when this Guy Gilbert character who I talk about sometimes,
I don't mean you, I mean Sky.
Yeah, but Sky, very defensive, like very defensive. No criticism. Do not criticize Sky on any way.
Stop. No,
I figured this out. But you see, I also got that from my mother. Like, you couldn't say one thing to her. And as soon as you did, she'd go, well, I'll tell you why that's happening. And it's because of you, or something
It's
like that. You know what I
interesting,
mean?
though, I have to say, Skip, thank you for the opportunity, because this has come up a few times over the years, and we love each other deeply in our own distant, beautiful,
That's right.
close way. But years later, but my basic problem, I thought it was beautifully acted, beautifully written, and but I thought there was one element around S&M that I thought was, and I use the word reductionist, I thought it reduced S&M to something that it wasn't.
Well, you were right. That's why I hate that play now.
I know
That's
it.
why, because I was a little boy writing play about how horrible S&M is.
And then you wrote
Like, how fucked up was that? S&M is fine. In fact, it's
You
very
wrote that-
important.
then
But
wrote
at the
that.
time, I was really fucked up, and you got it. So there you go.
But later, I'll add, but later you wrote an introduction to a reprinting of
Which
it,
is-
and you said, and I mean this lovingly, basically everything I had already said in the review.
Well, I think it's like Wittgenstein. I always talk to people about Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein wrote one book, and I forget the title, but he wrote one book, and it was all about big philosophy stuff. And then 10 years later, he wrote another book, and he said, I got it wrong. You know, and that to me is what the kind of thing a real artist, a real philosopher should do. I made a boo-boo. Instead of walking around going, oh, I'm always right, I do everything right. I have one more thing or two more things to ask you. This is a really difficult one. Okay. Do you, well, I don't know which one to ask you. Okay. Are you gay? I mean, it's just sometimes I think maybe you are bisexual or something else,
Well,
and I'm sort of technically, believe it or not, I'm technically bisexual, but someone tried to argue me out of this recently. What?
But I always like to quote Moynihan King and Keith Cole.
Good idea.
In recent past, but when I talked about, I had a show that you programmed at Buddies years ago called I Wanted to Be Bisexual, but my father was.
Is that the one where you had the Ken doll up your butt?
It was a G.I. Joe.
Oh my God! It was he had a GI Joe up his bottom, and he turned around and showed us. I'll never forget.
He was actually sewn into the pantyhose. I tried to actually put up there in rehearsal, but he kept falling out. But no, so I would say, like, the way I look at sexuality I'm almost close to your age. I've lived almost 70 years, and we've lived through many different categories,
Yeah.
and I now identify as non-binary. Which allows you to just fuck anyone you like. Which I'm oversimplifying, of course, but I'm queer, and I remember I've had sex with more women than many of my straight men friends, and I only say that because they get so jealous when they discover that. I don't have much sex anymore because I'm older and I'm been HIV positive for 17 years, so I just chose to change that. I'm not endorsing that. So I think now we can say. I have been gay. I have been bisexual. Or Sky, your dear friend Sky.
Yes.
When he would write letters for me when I was applying for jobs, and you would often introduce the letter by saying David Bateman is Canada's foremost transgendered performance artist, and I thought, well, I didn't know I was foremost, and I certainly didn't know I was transgendered, but thank you for reminding me of those possibilities. So yeah.
Yes, because the only reason why I keep wanting to say is that I'm technically bisexual because I had sex with women until I was 28 years old. Some people don't know that about me. And it's weird because there's two kinds of homosexuals. If you're talking about people who say I'm gay, and there's the ones who've never been inside the vagina, and then there's the ones who have. And it's very, very interesting. Now, what's interesting about me is that I'm never going back inside a vagina again. I've got nothing against vaginas. Don't get me wrong, but I ain't going there anymore. So that, I don't know, how do you categorize that? Very strange.
I think it's a product of your own, and it's like I said earlier, as Freud said, I think the only thing about people say we're born this way, but I believe that we're born with predispositions,
Right.
but I don't believe in biological determinism. So I believe we have agency. And for some reason, at a fairly young age, I took hold of that agency. And I don't have sex regularly, but my sexuality around women, it wasn't for a certain period. It was all through the period that everyone, and that's a whole other issue we don't have time to talk about. But I was told I was gay for so long,
Right.
despite what I said, because I'm so effeminate. How can you be so effeminate and be anything other than gay?
Me too, me
so
too.
I just threw my arms and said, okay, I'll just fuck whoever you think I'm supposed to fuck. And
That's part of it.
And that's
definitely.
part of it. But then there are women that I became close to. I still have a very close friend, and we don't have sex anymore, but we did, and she's with a man, and I have a friend in England who's with a woman, and we had a great time. We almost had a child, but she decided not to. And she was a lesbian, but she wanted to sleep with me because she liked the way I looked in drag. So it's very complicated. Sexuality is very complicated, and we can't confine it to one.
Final question for you, and final question for you, and then we have to stop. You like me, you even said it yourself, you're almost as old as Spizzy. Do you still have sex?
With my laptop? Yes.
No.
I haven't.
It doesn't matter. How do you deal with the aging thing? Are you okay with the aging thing? Because aging is not easy. It's not for sissies, as they say. Go ahead.
Well, I just think we don't have a lot of choice. So
We don't.
I think I manage it all right.
You manage it very well.
Sometimes that annoys me. I get up in the morning, I look in the mirror, and I scream, and then I laugh, and then everything's fine.
Well, I don't think there are many actual models, because we had this thing that happened called AIDS, where a lot of gay men died. We never got to see them be old. So even now, it's the first time we go, oh, these are old gay men. That's what they're like. And it's a huge exploring thing. Okay, I want to thank you very much. I'm sorry I talked so much.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye, Mr. David Bateman. Thank you so much for doing this.
What exactly are chargers and decks? Platter Lube comes in a revolutionary form factor to give you the best possible experience. Instead of that drawer of slimy, grimy bottles we've all got rattling around, just activate a Platter charger, use it, and dispose of it. Individual use chargers are less than half the price of a bottle of the other guys, plus there's more volume. And you can get a whole deck of 5 chargers for about the price of 4. Once activated, each charger has 100 milliliters of water-based lube, which means a deck of chargers has half a liter of lube. Go to platter.com to learn more and get slick with the latest technology for your lube. Live chat is available now at platter.com.
So I have 2 secret special guests. One just got it on, but the first one I'm going to use right now. It's a friend of mine. On his name, there, can you get by down? His name is David Marshall. So you should start coming up here. Is David there? Where's David? There he is. He's going to spend a couple of minutes, and he's going to do a couple of little poems, and then I have one more guest. Please welcome David Marshall.
Thanks everyone. So I'm gonna read a couple of poems. They're both ones that I just wrote over the last couple of days, thinking about this sort of event. I've been working on an ongoing project of lamentations, which I'm not 100% sure what lamentation means, but the way I'm sort of thinking of it is that it's a collection of, like, more often than not quite sad poetry. The first poem I'm going to read is called A George Michael Song About a George Michael Song.
Good. What else?
I'm reading a biography of George Michael. When the book gets to the event, where George Michael was arrested for indecent exposure in a park washroom in Beverly Hills, it becomes difficult to tell whether the author, James Gavin, is sympathetic to George Michael's position on who is responsible or who is in the right or not. The event is framed as an extension of George Michael's reckless and self-destructive tendencies because it was so avoidable. He quotes one of his associates as asking, "Why didn't he just hire a sex worker?" At a glance, this reaction isn't necessarily sex negative or sex normative. It isn't specifically a judgment of park cruising, but more so it's a pragmatic reaction, taking the opinion that hiring a sex worker would have been much more discreet while going cruising in parks in the mid-90s when police sting operations were common was inherently much riskier. James Gavin quoted Michael in another part of the book saying, "You don't pay a sex worker for the sex. You pay them to leave afterwards."
Stop being like,
So the mistake George Michael made when he was cruising in the park wasn't that cruising in a park was wrong, but that it exposed him to risk in ways that more discreet sexual behavior wouldn't have. So while James Gavin doesn't use his own words to provide his opinion and doesn't say that George Michael was wrong to cruise in a public park, the reader is steered towards the conclusion that George Michael was reckless in choosing to do so and exposed himself to the risk of being arrested through his actions in ways he easily could have avoided by behaving like other wealthy, discreet celebrities in Hollywood. But when George Michael went cruising in parks, dressed in track pants, a hoodie, and a baseball cap, because he didn't want to be recognized, he could seek out sex whenever he wanted to, without the complexity of the other person knowing they were sucking off George Michael, even though, at this point, he already had the habit of shaving his beard into a Machiavellian handlebar mustache and soul patch that I'm sure a lot of people probably recognized. When George Michael went cruising in the park, he could lay shirtless in the grass beside the washroom entrance in the sun, despite how he was usually uncomfortable being seen shirtless since he was self-conscious about his body weight. When George Michael went cruising in bathrooms, he could have sex openly, brazenly, compulsively, the way somebody who feels no shame about sex might have sex. But even if George Michael felt no shame about how he chose to have sex, James Gavin makes the case that he should have at least felt a justified fear of being caught, that he could have easily avoided the way he was socially punished for cruising in a park. But of course, George Michael wasn't being punished for cruising in a park. He was being humiliated for trying and failing to be discreet for so long. It was either that he didn't come out of the closet when everybody wanted him to, like they tried to make him do so for so long, or maybe because he didn't stay in the closet successfully for longer, until he could do it in a more dignified way, or maybe until sometime after he died. After all, pretty much everyone had already resolved that George Michael was obviously gay and closeted, that the female pronouns in all his songs were unconvincing, that all the women he dated or bragged about having sex with were beards or made up, and that all his songs about shameless, open sex, lust, and daddy role-playing were empty of any substance and overall fairly ironic. Probably, a lot of people loved the opportunity to say that, actually, George Michael was ashamed of his sexuality, like anyone else, and that maybe he should be, that he should at least have enough shame to be a bit more discreet, like so many others, and more importantly, that he takes himself and his music a bit too seriously. Either the hypocrisy, or the irony, or the impracticality of the closeted man being arrested for public sex should confirm that to everyone, that he's already gotten more attention than he deserved, and that it's more dignified for everyone involved if we stop thinking of him as a sexual liberationist the way that we think about Elvis or Madonna. But more often, George Michael was punished for too many of his songs being sad and dreary, or if not for that, for his upbeat songs being too poppy and empty of substance. He was punished for too many of his songs sounding like his own songs, for either forgetting how to rhyme a simple pop song someone can sing to, or for making another snooze fest of an album with more whining and complaining about the hardships of being rich and famous. But actually, I've always wanted my writing to sound something like either a Walt Whitman poem or a George Michael song.
Yeah.
So how do I activate Powder Lube? Well, to activate Powder Lube, just add water right up to the fill line, and it's located on the back of every charger. And add warm or cold water, although warm water is recommended. And of course, to prevent injury, never use hot water. Give it a little massage and a shake, and Powder dissolves into a super solution of the perfect lube. Order Powder Lube at plowder.com.
One final person who just came to me and said she wanted to do something, so she's going to do it, and she has to start making her way up here. Would you please welcome, I don't think the introduction is necessary, the fabulous, the gorgeous, the truly out there, Miss Mandy Goodhandy.
God damn! I would like to thank everyone for these lovely awards. And the doctor who installed them.
Leave this.
I know you're all sitting there, what the fuck is she gonna do? Like, what is she gonna say? Like, is she gonna be shocking? Is she gonna be naughty? Is she gonna be dirty? Let me tell you something about art. He dropped me and I fucking hate him. Art. You can take the world, look around, and there's nothing there, but you can create something if you're an artist. So back there when I was sitting, and my two friends that I'm sitting with probably thought I was being rude and not paying attention to who else was up here, but I was creating art. I know, I masturbated 3 times. You see, now you're listening up. Don't worry, don't panic. Everything's going to be okay. There's a purpose. This is why I'm here. This is a performance piece. Sometimes a performance piece can be something you just invent along the way. You can observe people in a room, and you can come up with something. Whether you're a stand-up comic, you can look at the funny side of something that's going on around you. Or you are an artist that can paint something beautiful. If I was standing here with a canvas, I could paint all you beautiful people on a canvas, and that would be art, because it's capturing a moment. Or I could sing something. Or I could dance on your table. Shut up. Right. The first David that was up here, my darling, that was beautiful. It was so raw, what you were saying, and I loved it. It was like, where is he going with this? How deep is he going to go with what he presented? It was a mixture of like shock and humor and something fascinating, because not many people, I don't know if you noticed, go that deep. He was so honest about the bathtub with his mother there. People don't normally talk about things like that. Things that when you were a child, you remember, but you don't talk about it later on because you think people will judge you. And isn't that what a lot of people do? They judge art. It's just a thing. So David, thank you for sharing that. David, number 2, I was worried about coming up here now because until you came up here and did sex pieces. and you were talking about sexuality, and I thought, oh, I can go out there and be comfortable because now that's the opening, it's being said. And I love the woman back there who's doing the knitting. I, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. She's crocheting while all of this interesting stuff is going on, and I love that. That shows that she's so comfortable. But what I did notice, the naughtier things got, the quicker she was crocheting. I swear to God, she finished the whole piece during the George Michael bit. And then we have Ryan Russell. I don't know if any of you have met Ryan. Okay, Ryan, yeah, have you met Ryan? See, a lot of you, you know Ryan.
I love Ryan.
That's it.
Mr. Ryan Russell.
Yes.
My website genius, Mr. Ryan Russell.
See, yes, he's a very important part of what goes on in this city, because there's very few of us who do not apologize for being sex positive.
Like, yes.
And the people who are not, exactly, the people, I've always noticed the people who are not positive about that are the ones that are the problem, not the ones that are laying it out right in front of you and going, this is what I do, this is what I like. So you either choose to be in my little bubble or you don't, and that's okay. That's allowed. But here's Ryan wandering around all night, bent over, hoping to get lucky.
Trying to get lucky.
He's pretending that he's avoiding the cameras, but he's walking with... That's observation. That was interesting. Hoping for a date, perhaps. And not only that, Ryan was sweet enough to bring me a boy.
Oh.
I showed you my abs.
That's it. Yeah, we know this, darling. And I thought, isn't that fascinating? I hadn't seen Ryan in a very long time. And he knew the perfect gift. So I'm sitting over there being innocent, having my soda water.
Vulnerable.
And he comes over and tells me he's going to introduce me to a young straight man who's 22 years old. And at this point, I'm what you call a tranny granny.
He should.
I apologize for anyone who's offended by the term tranny, but I'm not. And that's all that matters.
I would marry the younger version of you any day.
Is that what you would do?
Marry the older version.
The younger version of me. What the hell does this look like? A shapeshifter?
Yeah.
So this is what we're going to do. I have a little poem. I'm sorry I was taking up time there, Spizzy. I'm going to end now. Don't worry. Here we are. Come on up.
Oh.
Now, I just met him tonight.
Are we getting married?
But I know we're not getting married yet. What I'm going to do is I'm doing a poem that I call The Apple Tree. And I want you to be my apple tree. So stand under this tree over here and show them your abs.
Oh, fuck. I have to show the abs. Oh, good. Yeah, I saw it. Abs, please. Hey, too many layers. I protect them, you know?
Shut up.
Show up the abs.
I work alone.
Oh, fuck.
He showed them to me earlier. It's not as if I'm taking advantage. Okay. Him. I stood beneath the apple tree. The apples looked so good to me. And very high above my head, I saw them shining, bright and red. After I had waited long, a thrush, it sang a tiny song. A hooker in the apple tree. Threw an apple down to me. Get the fuck off my corner, bitch. Thank you, young man. Don't worry, Spizzy, I'm done. Thank you so much for having me.
Very much, Mandy. That was wonderful. And we have some eye candy, and it's going to increase our Concrete our YouTube fans by 1,000%. So we'll see you at the end of March. I tell you, remember, once the actual, I think it's early, March 24th, for the last, not the last, for the next Spizzy Spezzatura Jones.